Hello, the primary source I chose was 16.2. It was called Fearing Carib Cannibals. This source was a letter written in 1495 by Michele de Cuno about some of his travels while accompanying Christopher Columbus on his second voyage. According to Michele, after some stormy sea, the crew ended up finding two islands. One was uninhabited and the other was inhabited but by cannibals. On that inhabited island, they ended up seizing some of the young slaves from the cannibals between ages 15 and 16. Michele goes on to talk about their other encounters with the cannibals on different islands, from raiding their homes to capturing some of the cannibals from a canoe to send them and their slaves back to Spain. The letter ended with the story of how Michele had raped a cannibal woman on their boat. My first supporting source was by a book by Philip P. Boucher. The information I read from this source helped me to better understand my primary source because it gave more information about the cannibals themselves rather than Michele. The source said that there was more misinformation on these cannibals rather than information. It only refers to Carib Islands as cannibals with quotations, indirectly stating that they probably weren't even cannibals, and it says that Columbus had persuaded himself that the island Caribs were actually cannibals and subject to enslavement because of it. The second source I chose was a book by Stefan Lennick. The second supporting source helped me understand my primary source better because it speaks on Europeans' impressions of the early Caribbean native identities, which would have been these so-called cannibals in Michele's letter. This source debunks that these natives were even cannibals altogether, giving an example of well-known proof of the cannibalism. It stated that during Columbus's first voyage, Spanish sailors observed human bones in native dwellings in Guadalupe. Yes. And these bones were assumed to be remains of people that had been eaten. However, the source goes on to state that the remains that had been eaten humans was a rumor, and that the bones were probably evidence of mortuary practices and not cannibalism, and that nobody actually witnessed the consumption of human flesh. The third source is another book by Chris Lane. This third supporting source helped me to understand the primary source better because it talks about the Carib cannibals, but also Michele himself. The source actually mentioned the rape of the indigenous woman on the boat, and Michele had called her a woman of cannibals to justify it. It also mentioned that in 1503, not long after Michele had wrote his letter in 1495, that Isabella and Ferdinand used these so-called Carib cannibalisms to enact the first cannibal law, which basically said to enslave the cannibals in sort of a corrective custody, which consisted of these captives being cruelly treated, uprooted, branded, chained, and sold. The source also claims that the hearsay evidence of cannibalism had been sufficient enough to condemn given ethnic groups to Caribness, which helped to give rise to the destruction of the Indies. So, yeah. Thank you.